What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. I'm not sure if things have changed much since I was in graduate school, but at least back in my day, when we talked about clients ending therapy, it typically was taught to us as happening in one of two ways. Of course, there's the ideal gold standard where your client accomplishes all of their therapeutic goals probably on time, and you have a sort of graduation process session of sorts and send them off on their merry little way. And the other reason we were taught that therapy might end with a client is because the client wasn't ready, or they just, they were ditching what's in their best interest. Those were the only two ways that therapy ended, pretty much. So naturally, I was quite surprised as I launched into my therapy career to discover that there is a wide range of reasons why therapy ends with a client. And at least for me personally, when therapy ended for reasons other than like the client naturally arriving at a graduation moment with me, I started to carry shame around that because I thought that wasn't how it was supposed to go. But as it turns out, I'm not the only one. It's not that I'm providing some bad therapy or something, at least I hope. At the very least, this is an experience that I hear from so many other therapists, so I thought it would be helpful to share in this video so that, if you're carrying any shame around reasons why, therapy is ending with your clients, you can release some of that shame as well. The proper term for therapy ending with a client is termination. And personally, I have a deep beef with the use of the word termination to describe the ending of any kind of relationship. Like even in the most intimate of relationships, it just sounds aggressive, like I terminated my marriage. That's not the word we would use there either. So why do we use it with therapy? That's just always bothered me, so I just felt the need to say that here. Now that I got my little rant off my chest, let's talk about some of the reasons why the therapeutic relationship can end. Now, of course, it is very much possible for therapy to end in this sort of idyllic way that I was taught it was supposed to end. And you have this check-in moment where you say, is it time? Did you do the thing? Are you ready to graduate? And they go, yes. And you have like a termination session or two. There's that word, hate that word, where you reflect back on their growth and also how they're going to carry their growth forward without you. And you send them off like a proud parent into the world without you. And like maybe tears are shed and everyone is just singing kumbaya. Like that was what I was pretty much taught. And that does happen. But let me just say the number of times that that's happened in my career is minimal. Like I could count it on two hands, maybe one hand. Like that's very unusual in my practice that that's how things end. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that all the other reasons for therapy ending are bad ones. It just doesn't typically look like that in my practice. It is worth mentioning the category of therapy ending that I think gets a lot of airtime, but at least in my experience is really rare, which is the angry client storming off from terrible therapy. There are certainly clients who get angry, and there's certainly clients who end therapy because they're angry, but the storming out in the middle of session because you said something upsetting to your client or something like that is extremely rare. I've never had somebody storm out of session. So as I said, these more commonly taught reasons for why therapy comes to an end, at least in my experience, are some of the least common reasons why therapy ends. Oftentimes, the reason why therapy ends is very logistical, very practical. It's just not that deep sometimes. Sometimes it is deep. Sometimes it is deep. But just a lot of times it's not. So let's talk about some of the other reasons why therapy can end. One big one is clients moving away. This one is obvious if you're meeting with clients in person, and this would happen all the time for me when I was especially working in San Francisco, which is such a transient city. People are moving in and out all the time. So that was one of the most common reasons why therapy ended for me in my earlier years. Now that was back in 2012. So obviously since then, virtual therapy has become much more commonplace. But the reality is, depending on where you're licensed, there are specific rules about who you can see and where those people can live. Another reason why therapy ends is, as you're working with a client, you're working on something that's in your wheelhouse as far as your therapeutic skills. And then either you come to realize that the client has something going on that's outside of your wheelhouse, or they have something new pop up that is not within your area of specialty or even qualifications. And kind of in the same vein, referring to a different therapeutic modality is pretty common and a common reason for ending therapy. By modality, I'm talking about like if I'm working with someone in individual therapy, but I'm seeing that maybe they would benefit from couples therapy, then I might refer that person and their partner to a couples therapist. I am fully aware of the different schools of thoughts about whether it's more ethical to have co-occurring individual and couples therapy versus more ethical to either do one or the other, but not both modalities at the same time. We're not going to get into that ethical dilemma today, but I'm just naming it. Another reason for the therapy relationship ending, which is so sad when it happens, is when the client just isn't making progress, or sometimes their symptoms might be getting worse, even though you're doing the best job you know how to help that person deal with whatever they asked for your help with. If somebody isn't improving after seeing you for some amount of time, especially if you've already attempted to change your approach, it is ethically just so important to explore if working with somebody else could be a better fit for this client. And another reason why we might end therapy is because somebody is just not a good fit for us. Depending on what context we're working in, this might happen more often, especially if you're working in a setting where your clients are assigned to you and you don't get to do your own screening process. There's no need to kind of force it with the same person if you're not a good fit. You can always refer to a different therapist. Another very common reason for the therapy relationship ending is finances. I mean, obviously, if somebody loses their job and they can no longer pay for therapy, that's an obvious reason why therapy might end for that person. But it could be that they got a new job. Maybe they were even promoted and they switched insurance carriers, and now, you're not paneled with that insurance carrier, so they're going to be referred to somebody who takes their insurance. And sometimes it just happens where a client has changing financial priorities. Like maybe they've been investing financially in therapy for a season, but they also have this other goal that's financially costly that they're then going to pivot into. Like maybe they're going to start school, or maybe they're buying a house, and there's enough stability, hopefully, that it makes sense to just pivot their financial priorities, and therapy is no longer kind of at the top of that list, so to speak. Now, the next reason I'm going to go over is just one that has been so kind of buzzy lately, and that's ghosting. Basically, this is just when somebody never schedules a follow-up session, or they cancel a session and then never follow up to book again. I see this happen in my practice all the time, that clients will just drop off. And it might be something legitimate, like they legitimately weren't available to schedule a follow-up session. Other things in life became a priority. And then now a few months have gone by and they kind of realize, like, actually, I think I'm good. Like, I'm genuinely good. And most people don't circle back to their therapist and say, hey, I know it's been 3 months. Just FYI, I think I'm good now. It's just like, oh, okay, you just don't book a follow-up appointment. Like, that's a very normal human thing in most other service industry relationships. And I want to say for the record that is okay. Like, I think it's really common in our profession to shame clients for doing this, but honestly, this is quite socially acceptable across the board. So I don't think there's any need to shame our clients, whether it's towards them, certainly not towards them, but even amongst ourselves, like how we speak about it in consult groups or things like that. It's just like, oh, maybe that was just the way that person realized that they're ready to close the relationship. And that's great. They figured out what they needed or what they wanted. It could be a great thing. Another reason why therapy can end is if a client is very inconsistent in their attendance, or, they have a lot of no-shows, a lot of cancellations. Maybe they have totally legitimate reasons for needing to cancel so much, but they're just not able to access prioritizing showing up to their therapy appointment. And it might be one of these other things going on too, that maybe the finances are too much of a strain, or maybe it's not the best fit and that's how they're kind of showing it, or whatever it might be. You might kind of discover that through a conversation and potentially come to a close or refer out as necessary. And another reason why therapy ends is because, depending on the context, there can be a time constraint on the therapy. Some third-party payers like insurance, or if somebody has some sort of coverage through their employer, they'll only pay for a specific number of sessions, regardless of how you're doing at the end of those sessions. Like, they're not going to pay anymore once you get to that point. So the therapy naturally ends because you ran out of sessions. Now, this is certainly not an exhaustive list of every single reason why the therapeutic relationship can end, but I hope it helps color in more of an accurate picture of what it tends to look like when therapy ends with a client. I used to carry so much shame when therapy ended for one of these, like, many other reasons other than like the client magically, naturally sort of being ready to graduate on the exact date that we had planned. If it wasn't like that, I used to think that I had done something wrong. I would consult on it a lot, and I think it is a good idea to consult in all of these situations, but like with a heavy heart, I would consult thinking like, what the heck did I do wrong? I think it makes way more sense to have a sense of curiosity and an open mind about what might have happened. Bring it up in consult group, explore together, but no need to take it personally or judge anybody else. Well, I hope you found this helpful, and I'm curious if I skipped over any reasons why therapy ends that we didn't touch on. So if you have reasons to add that I didn't touch on, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform included for free for all users, and so much more. If you'd like to check out Therapy Notes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I have fun kind of reflecting on the things that I feel like people don't talk about often, at least in my training or my circles, and maybe I'm just in a weird bubble and y'all are talking about it, in which case more power to you, but I'm just kind of putting it out there that there's all these reasons that I wasn't really taught about for why therapy ends. So there you go, it's out there now. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.